Welcome back to GLBC Connections. I'm again with Stormy on my lap. I came upstairs today to do this. I was hoping she wouldn't follow me. Instead, she did follow me, and then she stood right down there and got right in between my knees and looked up at me and started whining because she really wanted up on my lap. It's actually relevant to today's topic of discussion. She wanted something to be on my lap, and I didn't want something for I didn't want her on my lap. And so we were at cross purposes and we were having a little bit of an argument. As you can see, I lost, as usual. And here she sits. Well, that's true in a lot of areas of life, right? Sometimes what we want are at cross purposes with other people. I remember one specific time I was in my 20s and I was at cross purposes as we were working in the glass factory. We were making some square bottles, and the production manager wanted them to put in boxes, and I, as the quality manager, thought they were not good enough to put in boxes, and we had an argument, and it was a doozy of an argument. I remember it quite specifically. We walked outside of my office together, and we were walking over to the line to see what was going on, and he was yelling at me and I was yelling at him, and it was pretty much at the top of our lungs, and neither one of us was listening to each other because he wanted bottles in boxes and I didn't want those bottles in boxes. We were at cross purposes in that moment. This is the heart of the matter for so many arguments. We want what we want, and we wind up at cross purposes. Stormy wanted on my lap. I didn't want her here. The production manager wanted the bottles packed. I didn't want the bottles packed. When we get to cross purposes, arguments so often happen. And that's what James says in James 4. It's a simple passage, a very simple passage, and it's easy to understand what's going on. But it's hard to put into practice. This is what James says. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. What is James saying here? He's saying that quarrels and fights come from the selfish desires that exist within us. That point should actually be obvious. Every time you get angry, if you look deeply, you will find that you have some desire that's being frustrated. The real trick is to figure out, is that really a correct thing that you should want, or does it come from a selfish place? And here I'm going to be pretty direct and pretty blunt. 99% of the time that we're really truly angry, it's coming from a selfish place and not a right place. So how do we fix that problem? Well, James actually gives some good advice, but we take it out of context and don't quite understand what he's saying. He says this. He says, you do not have because you do not ask God. And when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. So James says, you're not getting what you want. Why are you not getting what you want? Well, he says you're not asking God. But what is it you actually need? Well, here James points out that so many of our requests, even to God, can be quite selfish. We want what we want. We have selfish desires. We have selfish motivations. Stormy's being a little selfish right now, wanting to sit up on my lap, even if I don't want her here. What should we ask for? Well, I said the context matters, and it does. And I think we need to eliminate the chapter break there in chapter 4 and just look up a little bit at what Brian talked about on Friday. Look at verse 17. The wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. That sounds like and is the opposite of these selfish quarrels and fights that the people are having. And why are they the opposite? Well, he talks about the wisdom that comes from heaven. When we have wisdom that comes from heaven, it comes out in these very productive relational ways. And so James, I think when he says you don't have because you don't ask, and when you ask you have with wrong motives, what he's really implying is we don't ask for wisdom. We don't ask for the ability to see things as God sees them. We don't ask for us to have what God wants to give us, wisdom, so that we have good and right relationships. So the solution to the fights and the quarrels, says James, is not to just get what you want. I think that's how we think our quarrels end, right? How do you solve a problem? How do you fix a fight? How do you fix a quarrel? Well, we tell everybody else, give me what I want. We don't say that's what we do, but that's really what we do. James says that's not how they get solved. They get solved when we go to the Lord and we ask for wisdom. And wisdom gives us the ability to see things as God sees them. When we see things as God sees them, we see what other people want. We see it from their point of view. I think that's really important. There's a sense of empathy that's missing when we're in a quarrel and a fight. Why was I yelling at my production manager friend, and why was he yelling at me? Because we weren't seeing each other's perspectives. I didn't see how I was hurting his business. He didn't see how he was hurting what I considered to be my customer. Those things were important in that moment. A little empathy would have gone a long way. We probably would have solved the problem quite a bit faster if we'd listened to each other, if we had seen what each wanted. Wisdom is the ability to see what God sees. And when we see what God sees, we see other people through the eyes of love. So wisdom helps us gain empathy for others so that we don't fight and argue. In fact, I think really when we have wisdom, that all those selfish wants and desires we have, they really go away because we realize we don't need those things. We see what other people want, what other people need, and wisdom gives us a desire to meet those needs. So my hope today, as you watch this, is for you to think about this the next time you have an argument. So if you're married, think about the next time you and your spouse are having an argument. If you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or just a friend or a neighbor that you're fighting with, think about what you're fighting about. What is it that you actually want? And then ask the Lord for wisdom to show you whether or not what you want is really the right thing. Ask the Lord to help you see things from His point of view and see if that doesn't change your perspective so that those fights and those quarrels come to an end. James gives us really good advice. It's really easy. It's really hard to put into practice. I trust you'll do so anyway. Thanks for joining me today.